Should Kamala Harris have sat for an interview with Fox News' Bret Baier? Well, Vice President Kamala Harris recently sat down with Bret Baier from Fox News. And for those of you who may not be aware, he's the chief political anchor. The question is whether she should have given this interview. Now, some may say, well, he's the political anchor for Fox News. Of course she should have given the interview. When I consider which interviews clients and colleagues should accept, I first encourage them to think about their audience. Who is your audience? What outlets does your audience members consume? Like, what outlets are they watching, reading, and listening to? I then encourage clients to think about whether they have a reasonable chance of making their point. In other words, are they walking into hostile territory? Are they walking into a point where they are going to be cut off, where their comments are going to be distorted? So do they have a reasonable chance of connecting with the outlet's audience and that audience truly listening and engaging them on what they say? When clients don't have a reasonable chance of making their point, I carefully consider the efficacy of the interview. Is it truly worth it? Now, for their part, the vice president's team was likely thinking about several things, including her voters, namely which platforms do they listen to, watch, or read. Now, I'm guessing that most of her voters, the overwhelming share, they're going to come from Democrats and maybe a sliver of independents, maybe a large share, depending on who you ask. I would imagine that she's going to get a smaller share of moderate Republicans, a smaller share. Her team was likely wondering, okay, how do we mitigate criticism? She's done this media blitz where she sat down with a host of media outlets and platforms. What would it look like if she were to do this media blitz and not include Fox News? Would skipping Fox News sour Republicans who might support her? Her team was also probably thinking about how do we make inroads to Republicans who are disaffected with President Trump. Now, again, I would venture to say that most people who are going to vote for her, not only are they mostly Democrats and independents and a smaller sliver of Republicans, but by this point, most people probably know who they're going to vote for. I think a smaller share of the people who she captures are going to be middle of the road Republicans. She's not going to win hardcore Republicans or members of the far right, at least not in any sizable number. The problem is that many far-right Republicans tune into Fox News. And since Vice President Kamala Harris was never going to include this demographic in her big tent, why grant the interview? When you're running for office, everything that you say will be carefully analyzed. And when you're participating in an interview with an outlet that is hostile to your policy, your position, and maybe even your candidacy, what you say is going to be heavily criticized. Now, a single interview could live for weeks, if not months or years. In my opinion, the vice president was never going to have a fair opportunity to make her case on Fox News. I just don't think it was going to happen. And if you look at the interview, it's pretty clear that it was contentious from the very start. Baier pressed Harris, again, she's the Democratic presidential nominee, on illegal immigration. Instantly. Taxpayer support for gender transition surgery and other areas that closely aligned with President Trump's regular attacks against her. So when she walked into that setting, she was on the defense from the moment the interview began. Now, I'm not saying that she didn't manage it well or that she didn't do a good job. I think that she did the best that she could in that kind of environment. But she was under attack, from the moment the interview began. The Poynter Institute noted that CNN's Brian Stelter, and he is a media analyst and journalist. Now, apparently he went back and he compared Baier's style when he was interviewing Harris and his style when he interviewed President Trump. He noted that overall, Baier interrupted Harris at least 38 times in a 27-minute interview. So that was about twice as often as he interrupted President Trump. When he sat with President Trump, that interview was longer, about 36 minutes, and he did interrupt him. I think it was around 28 times, so a little bit less than what he did with Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, Stelter, again, who is a media journalist, also looked at Baier's opening questions for President Trump and Vice President Harris. The first question that President Trump received was, what do you think is the most important issue facing the country right now? An open-ended question like that really allows a person to paint a picture, to ramp up, and to have space to really set the table, so to speak. His first question to Vice President Harris was far more aggressive. How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years? So that question in and of itself puts her on the defense. It immediately places blame in her lap. I mean, right from the outset. So there was no warm up. There was no, what's your vision for the nation? It was right at it. Also during this interview, which by the way was viewed by around 8 million people, Harris referenced President Trump's remarks about needing to call in the National Guard or the military to deal with the enemy from within. Now, Baier said, okay, let's show that clip, but he actually showed a different clip where Trump explained what he meant by that phrase. Vice President Kamala Harris said, look, with all due respect, the clip that you showed is not the clip of him saying that he was going to call in the National Guard and the military to deal with the enemy from within. Now, it begs the question of who does he consider to be the enemy from within? Like, who is that? And again, that was not the clip that Baier showed. So roughly 24 hours after the interview, he acknowledged that he made a mistake and not showing the specific clip. He said that he expected his team to have up the specific clip, but they didn't. He also said that he intended to show 2 clips. So even in showing 2 clips, it was giving President Trump an opportunity to explain what he meant or to put it in a different context. Now, I understand that we should talk to people who think differently from us. Otherwise, we each go to our respective silos and we make very little progress. But I also understand that when people fundamentally oppose you, they're not going to give you a fair shot. They're also not going to go out of they may also go out of their way to harm you. Now, this is true on a basic level, but it's especially true when considering a presidential election when the stakes are so high. When you're running for office, let alone the presidency, each interview may help you or it can provide fodder for those who oppose you. I think the Fox News interview provided a lot of fodder on both sides. For their part, Fox was able, and not just Fox, but other right-wing media outlets were able to take that interview, take it apart, analyze it, and again, this could live on for weeks. So should Vice President Harris have given the interview? I'm not sure. In the same way that I was not convinced that President Trump should attend the National Association of Black Journalists, their annual convening, I don't know that he walked away from that event scoring many voters. The people in that room were most likely going to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. And when you consider President Trump's many attacks on several high-profile journalists who are affiliated with the National Association of Black Journalists, again, I question why he went to that event. So there are some people who are saying, look, she did this media blitz. She had to go. It made sense that she goes. It shows that, she was willing to walk into hostile territory. But again, I always wonder, okay, but what did we gain? What did we gain and what was the opportunity cost for it? Don't get me wrong. Adversarial interviews can be helpful. But I also think that adversarial interviews can also be fair. That should be the goal. Now, I should have said this at the start, but if you like this content, please be sure to subscribe, to share, and you can also leave a positive comment. Thank you for listening.